All right, mic check, mic check. We'll be starting up, and should we just, let's start now. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Dwight St Garden. Big shout out to Neighbor for allowing us to use this wonderful space. I am a member of Neighbor. This is a little bit about Dwight St Garden. 24 plots of fresh produce for the people, by the people. Nothing is rented here. It all goes to food distributions or goes right in those baskets over there, where the residents can come and pick up. It's a bit it's like an anarchic model. People come in to volunteer. The residents who live, around the blocks are able to come in and, do something that they don't really do in Holyoke, which is garden. Being that kind of live in a heat island. So big thank you to Neighbor for allowing us to use the space. And I'll start off with introductions. Actually, let me get some songs started, get the vibe going on. Okay, yeah. I'll introduce myself. I'm John Rivera. I go by JR, he, they pronouns, and I'm an activist in Holyoke, and born in Kissimmee, raised. I'm from the Puerto Rican diaspora, and so radical socialist. I'm work with IAC, Neighbor, a couple other organizations, and my labor is mostly in agriculture. I work for the Holyoke Farmers Market, with assisting the farmers there under these tough times, and that's pretty much it for me, and we'll pass it along to Selena.
Hello, everybody. Thank you all for being here today. What a great turnout. Hopefully the rain will hold off. My name is Hector Figarella. Been living in Western Mass for a long time. I are organized with the Anti-Imperialist Action Committee. And so today we're gonna just share with you what we saw in Venezuela, a report back of what's going on down there, why the sanctions are taking place, and why the United States government is going about crushing the Venezuelan economy and in the process killing tens and tens of thousands of people in the process. So why is that happening? Why is that taking place? And why that struggle that the Venezuelan people are fighting right now is connected to us here at home. Why is that connection? There is a connection. So we really want to get to talk about that and also hear from you guys. Great. So thank you, Selena.
Hi. Thank you all for being here. My name is Selena. I organize with the Anti-Imperialist Action Committee also, and I'm really grateful to Neighbor and JR for hosting us, and for all the many organizations that co-sponsored. I see DSA, Code Pink, lots of comrades from different places. So I just wanted to introduce what IAC is. We've been, IAC, stands for the Anti-Imperialist Action Committee. We've been around for almost 3 years, and just we're born out of a necessity of looking around when the coup in Bolivia happened, and wanted to say something about it, because it's pretty horrific, and from that transitioned mostly to trying to fight to lift the sanctions against Venezuela, and also some solidarity work with Cuba that we'll do another event about soon. One of our kind of major highlights, and hopefully you all got a little pamphlet that talks more about our work, but is to, we managed after a 2-year campaign to pressure Congressman McGovern to publish a letter condemning the sanctions in Venezuela. So going from calling Maduro, who's the president, a dictator and how horrible he is, to going to publishing what there's an organization called the Center for Economic and Policy Research that has produced leading reports on Venezuela and a number of other issues around the world in foreign policy, and they called that letter the strongest letter on sanctions to ever come out of Congress. And so we're a pretty small group, and we have aspirations to grow and do more. And so if you're here and interested in any of this stuff, please come talk to us. Hector and I are in IAC, so is JR, Claire, maybe everybody who's in IAC, raise your hand. Come talk to us and get involved. But that's what we've been doing. And we've also raised funds for some of the communes in Venezuela. Collectively, around $8,000 were sent to the Comunidades del Lídice, which Hector and I visited in Caracas, and we'll talk about. And we'll ask if folks are able to. We're also fundraising for another commune to have a little bucket, and food was very generously donated. But if you're here and if you're able, we have both a Venmo and a bucket. We're going to send to. We'll talk more about that later. Sent to a commune near Puerto La Cruz in Venezuela, talk more about that in a little bit, but also just kind of what Hector said is, like what are the connections between working class struggles here and in places like Venezuela. So by no means is it only Venezuela, but Venezuela and Cuba and a couple of other places have like really, 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 really been in the crosshairs for very specific reasons. Like the US isn't really a friend of working people anywhere, but like why are they going after Venezuela so hard in particular, and like what is so threatening that we can also learn from? Like what are communes? Like what are people doing about like houselessness in Venezuela that like impacts Holyoke and all of the US. So that's what we're going to talk about. And maybe just wanted to also quickly say that I'm curious, and maybe I'll lead with this, but I'm curious like what you all have heard about Venezuela. Like maybe just if a couple people want to popcorn, just kind of lead with like what knowledge we have in the room. Like, and it can be not like your own thoughts, but like when you hear Venezuela, like what are the things that you hear already? Maybe just speak up.
Largest oil reserve in the world.
Largest oil reserves. What else do folks hear?
All the school kids have laptops.
All the school kids have laptops. Mm-hmm.
What's the question again?
What have you heard about Venezuela? Like, what's the knowledge in the room? And it doesn't have to only be like what you think necessarily, but like when you hear Venezuela, like what are the things out there that you hear?
The housing initiative.
What is?
The housing initiative. It's like I think it was under the Chavez administration, that like basically they made like
So giving 1 million homes under the housing initiative under Chavez and Maduro. It's because we have a socialist-leaning crowd. It's all the good things, which is also why we're here. But
A very reputable source told me they're eating rats down there.
They're eating rats? That's a new one. Anything else burning? Yeah, go ahead.
Under Chavez, he like greatly reduced poverty in the country, like by an extreme amount in such a short amount of time.
Reducing poverty. Sweet. We have a great crowd. I'll make this little bit really short then, but I think those are all really great things. Kind of what I was expecting maybe a little bit is like dictatorship, like all the things that, we know are out there, but you all are great. And I think it's maybe just important to like start the conversation by saying that like Venezuela is not some like magical unicorn of socialism where everything is perfect and everyone has like solved all of the problems. And revolutions are built by human beings, and so therefore, like human beings, they're flawed and they're full of contradictions. And so, I think actually one of Chavez's most famous speeches that he gave right as he was dying, right before he died, called "Strike at the Helm," was about self-criticism and the importance of holding ourselves accountable and being able to absorb and welcome criticism. So I think like all questions are really welcome. And I also want to say that I think that when we're criticizing or when we're asking questions, it's really important to frame like why and where is that criticism coming from, because if we were to have a revolution in the US tomorrow, like what tools, like what mistakes are we going to make, like we're already making mistakes and we haven't quite gotten there yet. So like, just like when we should all like think critically and ask critical questions. But I don't know, maybe you all have experienced this too, but sometimes when you say Venezuela, the first thing is dictator and they did this and oil and climate change and like there's always something. And so like, yeah, let's ask critical questions and talk about it. And I think that should be welcome, but also not like trying to stay away from like gotcha moments. Well, they did this wrong, so they're doing socialism wrong and I know better. And one of my favorite articles is a printout on the back table called A Letter to Intellectuals Who Deride Purity, or who deride revolutions in the name of purity. Michael's holding it up, but I think that does a really good job of talking about like grounding our criticism also. Not refraining from criticism, but like comradely criticism and not like, aha, gotcha, I know better. So all questions and criticisms welcome, but I just wanted to say that and I don't know, Che Guevara said that like the hardest part of a revolution comes after you win. Like you have to actually build something. You're not just fighting against something. It's shit. Like we have to get, everyone's homeless. Like there's a lot of poverty. Like colonialism has like stripped all of our resources and enslaved our people. And now we're not just trying to make everybody equally poor. We're trying to like build something and like, stand with dignity. And how do we do that? So that's really hard. So I think we have a lot to learn from our comrades, but I just kind of wanted to frame that too. And I'm looking forward to hearing what questions people have. And I don't think we're like wizard experts or by any means, so maybe we won't know the answers, but hopefully, I'm looking forward to the discussion. And I think the last thing I'll just say on that too is that why talk about Venezuela specifically? Because the world is a big place. It's important to talk about internationalism and solidarity in many places, not only in Venezuela. That I think there's something particular about Venezuela and other places like Cuba as well, that it's like, oh, we can actually look to something and be like, that's what we can build to. And also it's really hard. So we'll talk about both. Like it's really, really hard. Like people are really struggling right now and we'll talk about that. But like, yeah, like kids, Chavez gave like every kid a laptop. Hector's nieces still have them. And that was a long time ago. So like they're good laptops, you know, and all these things. So I think like capitalism kills our ability to dream. And so how do we kind of like recover that for ourselves? And part of that is like, oh, like looking at places where it exists, where socialism exists and trying to build that here. Because I think ultimately one of the strongest ways to be in solidarity that I hear again and again and again is to build a revolution at home so we can like take the whole thing down. That's imposing sanctions and all of that. So take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Selena. Okay, we want to continue the conversation. And so why Venezuela? Why is Venezuela under attack? Why is Venezuela under such crushing sanctions that are killing thousands and thousands of people, that have killed tens of thousands of people, and continue to like just inflict a lot of pain on the population of Venezuela? How many people here have heard the term? This is a very left-leaning group, so the term hybrid war. Raise your hands if you have heard the term hybrid war. Yes, hybrid war, right? So hybrid war is a new way that the United States government is going around the world waging war. It's warfare. It's warfare on a very, you know, evolved, cruel, draconian way of going about getting your way around the world. In the case of Venezuela, and many other countries are on the sanctions, it's through sanctions. Sanctions is the new preferred weapon of the United States government, of U.S. imperialism, of submitting any country to their will. And the thing with sanctions is sanctions have never worked when it comes to changing a government. That's what they're hoping that the sanctions would do in Venezuela, that you inflict so much pain on the local population, on the civilian population, that people have it so bad that they uprise against the government, against their own government, and change the government. That's the hope. In the case of Venezuela, this has not happened, and it's not going to happen. The sanctions regime started like really to get really tight under the Obama. Believe it or not, no, you guys will believe it because under former President Barack Obama, he declared Venezuela a clear and present danger to the safety and security of the United States. Venezuela, a country of 30 million people, has a military, but it's just no way that Venezuela could do anything to hurt the United States, economically or militarily. Well, by Obama declaring Venezuela a clear and present danger, that opened the door for the Trump sanctions. When Trump came to power, the sanctions became just excruciatingly brutal. And this was around 2016, 2017 was when the year when things got really bad. One of the first things that happened with the sanctions, Venezuela was not able to access the international financial system, so they couldn't pay for things. In coordination with the United States government and the Venezuelan right fascist wing, a lot of food, most food products disappear, like basics, food staples. But one of the first things that disappeared were feminine hygiene products, just like gone. You just couldn't find them anywhere. Medicines were hard to come by, and this led to medicines. You're talking medicines from HIV drugs to cancer, insulins. It's a huge one. You don't get your insulin, you will freaking die. There's no way around it. You will die, and that's exactly what has been happening in Venezuela. People have died. Many members of my family have died as a consequence of the sanctions. My father died because of lack of anticoagulants, of blood thinners. My uncle died because he couldn't find the malaria medication. My aunt died last year of COVID, around the time when Venezuela was trying to import vaccines, and the U.S. government blocked the payment, so the vaccines couldn't come in. This was around the time when I personally work in the healthcare system. I had 3 vaccines. One vaccine. I had my 3 shots. I think 3 shots by that time, and my aunt had not had any, and she died as a consequence of that. And you can speculate all you want, but you can say that she died as a direct consequence of the sanctions. This is the brutality and the inhumanity of the sanctions. They just, the United States government will tell you in a press briefing that they care about the freedom of the people of Venezuela, but it's all bullshit. And so why is this happening, right? Why are they trying to destroy the Venezuelan socialist revolution? Why are they doing that? So don't want to go into that right now. So Venezuela has been building a different model, a different socialist model. They have, since the Chavez years. But there's been a big setback because of the Trump sanctions. So a lot of people have died, and a lot of people are really struggling to make ends meet. They don't make enough money. Right now, they're actually experiencing hyperinflation again. And everything in Venezuela is dollarized right now. The Venezuelan bolivar, the national currency, has been destroyed. So Venezuela has been building a socialist model that is based on taking care of the individual, the human being, and the planet, and they're doing this by providing free healthcare, free education, and housing. Somebody you mentioned housing. So this is done through different missions. So the housing mission has built over 4 million homes given to the Venezuelan people, to those who need them. So as far as the shanty towns that you used to see back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and even the 90s, that has basically disappeared. You have like dignified homes, and that are basically super affordable to free. So 4+ million, and this being a coordination with other governments, like in the case of Cuba, has been under sanctions for 60 years now. They collaborate with each other. So with Petrocaribe, which was formed under Chavez, a lot of Caribbean nations like Haiti, Cuba, were part of this system where they would just access oil from Venezuela, and they will pay it back 20, 30 years later, no interest charge. So this solidarity that's taking place. But what's really worrisome to U.S. imperialism and and capitalism is that it's a new model of building a society. So it's a model that is where capitalism is not the reigning force. It's not about money. It's about the individual and the planet. And this is really terrifying to the U.S. imperialism. That here in the U.S. and other parts of the world, we would know that another world is possible. You can build a different society. It doesn't have to be built the way it is right now. So they're throwing everything they have at the Venezuelan revolution, and they're causing a lot of pain. A lot of the successes have, besides the housing, education, and just the coordination that has been taking place, the solidarity among Latin American nations is really also so really worrisome that all the nations in the hemisphere, what the U.S. calls Latin America its backyard, will take this model and threaten U.S. hegemony in the area. So I'm gonna pass it over to Selena.
Yeah, maybe just to add a little bit to that, and talk a little bit about some of the things that we saw that are kind of recent on the ground examples of these things. But one of the things under Chavez, and I don't think, maybe this is one thing, I don't think you can be a Chavista without being Madurista. You're just for the revolution, or you're kind of not, in my opinion. But you can have problems with governments, but in terms of when Chavez, just wanted to qualify that because of what I'm about to say, but when Chavez was in office, he put a lot of focus on standing up for people with disabilities. And so you'll see people who have government logos, with people who have wheelchairs with government logos on the back. But because of the sanction, and there's also really, really good quality healthcare. So all public hospitals in Venezuela are free. You never need to pay to get treated. However, because of the sanctions that Hector was talking about. And the sanctions are basically like what a sanction essentially is it's in this case is it's the U.S. government saying, okay, not only will the U.S. lock you out of anything the U.S. has control over, so you can't, like, we won't trade with you, we won't buy your oil, we won't do this, but anybody who trades with you will get punished. So anybody, let's say a country wants to, and there have been some modifications to this, but in general, any country who wants to buy oil from Venezuela, for example, if the U.S. says you can't buy oil from Venezuela with that, and then like if they go against that, which like Iran and China and some countries have, they are then exposed to the same like brutal regime and the same numbers of like however many tens of thousands of people dying every year. So because of the impact of that, of not only the U.S. refusing to do business with Venezuela, but the U.S. using its power to punish anybody who dares to then like step in and not even help out, just like trade or do business or any of those things. When we go, like you'll see wheelchairs. Okay. So Hector's, one of the reasons we were there for family medical, even Hector's mom's wheelchair is from the government, but it wasn't directly from the government because the government doesn't have any money to make wheelchairs anymore. So it's borrowed from some neighbor or something like that. And it's, like it's a good wheelchair. It's made it, but it's like missing one of the like comfortable arm things you put your arms on. And when we went to the hospital, okay, just checking, it's your family. We went to Hector's uncle was in the hospital when we were there for cancer treatment, and they you don't have to pay for anything when you go, right? Because it's free healthcare, but the government's broke. And so now the government, which used to give, everybody gets x-rays. You go to the hospital, whatever you need stitches, you get stitched up. Now they're just hospitals or people with the doctors are free, but there's no medicine. And so your niece was telling us that, she needed stitches. She had a big injury and the family had to run around looking for the thread material for the stitches. So if you can't pay for the thread material, well, the hospitals are free and the doctors are free, but they don't have any material to give you stitches. So it's not that the government's charging for money, but when the sanctions, just to give a sense of scale, as of 2019, so this is a little outdated, but the sanctions cost Venezuela $30 million every day, and every single day, which is an amount of money I can't even fathom. And we, the Bank of England, when the U.S. tried to overthrow the Venezuelan government in 2019, stole all the gold reserves. So Venezuela can't, which is a gold-producing country, can't access its gold. So all of that money that before, from a huge part from oil revenues that was being used to buy medicines, to buy wheelchairs, to buy the material to make stitches, it's just not there. So you go to the hospital and you sit in the hospital to wait to see a doctor and a lot of people have left because it's hard. So there's brain drain, right? People go to other countries where they're going to be able to make more money for their families. So you go to Venezuela, you can go to the hospital for free, but there's no material for stitches. You have to go to the pharmacy, see if you can get, we bought saline solution, that we everything. It's saline solution is medical salt water, right? They didn't have that. And I mean, yeah, there was a little box in the hospital and the elevator, when you're taking the elevator up, because a lot of patients can't walk, we didn't have doors. So, and then there weren't enough wheelchairs in the hospital. So let's say we get there, right? We arrive, there's somebody being carried who broke her leg or can't walk. And so her family's carrying her into the hospital because there's not enough wheelchairs. There's one guy in the hospital. You have to run around trying to find the wheelchairs. Can you get this person there? It's not enough wheelchairs. So what do? You either sit there because you can't walk, or you hope you have family to lift you in to see a doctor who's probably a great doctor who can see you for free to give you a prescription the government can't pay for that you can't afford. So I think the sanctions, there's these two things at the same time, that the sanctions are really brutal, and also there's a reason that the U.S. is, like Hector said, is kind of squashing down so much. So yeah, that's kind of what the sanctions do, and you can just see those two things at the same time, free public hospital, awesome, take the elevator, but there's no doors, or you need an x-ray to see your lungs, but the parts for the x-ray machine were made in the US and they can't get them anymore, so we can't actually give you an x-ray. So that must suck to be a doctor, frankly, in that context where you're the doctor and part of this revolutionary process, and what are you going to prescribe someone? So yeah, just to add to that a little bit, and I think we had a whole conversation when we were talking about how to structure the conversation, because there's all this doom and gloom, but it's also really fucking amazing. They're doing this really, really amazing stuff. And so how do you just not be like, everything's horrible and it's horrible and the US sucks, but like actually it is. And also the US does suck. But like also it's really amazing and there's all this really amazing stuff. So it's happening at the same time. And healthcare is still free. There's obviously challenges with that. But I think like one of the things that was really amazing was when we went to, and I know Hector's going to talk about the communes, when we went to visit some of the comunas. Like one of the things, so the Comunatos de Illiteracy, which many of you donated to over the last couple of years, you raised $8,000 over a span of time to send down. They have, okay, we're maybe going to overlap a little bit, but a commune is basically, which Hector will talk more about, is basically like a their neighborhoods coming together to organize around issues that impact them, and it's part of like the revolutionary process, so that it's not just like a random community like doing the things it needs, but it's like a community addressing its needs. And then they're also building a union of different communes, so that it's actually like part of an organized structure to like, you know, not like decentralized. It's not like a model of anarchism, but of kind of like decentralized power. But I don't know, of power that's like built from the bottom up, I guess is the way of saying that. And so when we went to the Comunatos de Illiteracy, well, there's no medicine, right? And so like if you're poor, which you are if you're living in like a comuna, because for the most part I think they're like working class neighborhoods, they came together, and there are 5 doctors that work in the commune, and they built a relationship with people and organizations in Chile to get medicine. So people go and visit the commune. When you walk into the pharmacy, you look to the left, there's like a small filing cabinet which has medicines, and then you look to the right and there's a giant pile of suitcases. So it's like, all right, well, our government's broke because they just got robbed by one of the most powerful countries in the US. We have no medicines, but we're not just going to sit around and die. So what are we going to do about it? And so they've like self-organized, to be able to figure out ways to access medicine. And so, yeah, just to maybe highlight, and I'll wrap up with that, but that like it's both of these things at the same time, that like the sanctions are really horrible. There's a reason that they exist. And also people are like doing really amazing work.
Yeah, I think you kind of covered it, but yeah, the comunas, the communes, we have worked with 2 on so far. So we just recently made a connection with one in Barcelona, which is near Puerto La Cruz. Luisa Cáceres, that is Mandy, and so comunas are formed around a necessity that a particular community is having. So in the case of Luisa Cáceres, the trash around the city was just always a huge problem. They just like, you know, just trash everywhere. So they took it, the community organized, the former commune, and they are now building a plastic processing plant. So they have some support from the government finally that has just started to trickle back in. So they're organized. They're organized so that they have elections. So you have different positions within comuna, that people that oversee different aspects of the comuna, from safety to education, sports, recycling. And all these are all elected positions, and they make decisions, at their meetings, and they'll discuss issues and and how they want to focus their time and resources on particular issues. So they're working on that on a recycling plant. And during the Chavez years, Chavez built the Mercal food system. It's a national system of supermarkets, and this came as a consequence of sabotage from the right wing around food access, because most of the food that was produced was controlled by the oligarchs, by right wing, super rich, that got rich over the decades from oil. They just basically stole the money from oil revenues. So, but that sort of like went away. So, and then now the Mercal that was in that neighborhood, the Comuna just took it over, and they're trying to build it back up, and they're trying to see about starting their own, community within the commune supermarket, so that the community can have access to affordable foods. So that's the context. It's like, and Chavez's dream was to basically have a government, a very involved community, citizenship, the people, and the comunas is a way to like do this from the bottom up. They're the ones making the decisions, identifying the problems, and they're not just out there on their own. They're supported by the government, and they're also codified within the constitution and within laws. They just passed a recent law around the comunas. So it's very serious. I mean, what the goal is, the ultimate goal. And maybe you want to touch base about how the connection is.
Yeah, maybe a couple things, but I just to expand, maybe talk a little bit about, like, since it's a report back, some of the things that we saw directly when we were at. So Hector went to the Comuna near Puerto de la Cruz in Barcelona after I left, but the two of us went to Illiteracy, which we also not only fundraised for, but did an event with. So some of you may have had a chance to talk to Jesus a couple of years ago. We did like a big Zoom event. And I just thought, I don't know, I live in Leeds, which is not very far away. And like, there's all of this like neighborhood, I don't know, controversy because there's trash everywhere because the city has no trash bins and people come to swim and all of that. And it's just interesting to like be in the midst of that conversation and then go to the Illiteracy, where like in addition to the pharmacy, they have brigades set up to take care of like whatever the community needs. And they decide, and like Hector said, they have these meetings. So it's like, okay, well, there's trash everywhere. Like in my neighborhood, I don't know, there's trash everywhere, right? And so they have these like cleanup brigade. So they start, I think it could be a little off on the hours, but it's like 6 a.m. and then they're done at noon. So they go and they clean everything up and then the next day they'll do it again. And then there was a huge like hole, I don't know, like I don't even know what to call it. Like imagine a pothole, but like the size of the tent or something. And it was dangerous because people could just like fall into it. And so they organized to build like a fence around it so that it, like kids and people like wouldn't, I don't know, you're like on not paying attention, you like fall into a hole. So like improving safety, they have basketball courts, they have like a music school, they have all these different things, and the scale is just like really amazing. We didn't quite figure out the tech to look at pictures, but I don't know, I'd be happy to show people if you want, or there are more resources like little videos and stuff online that we can share. But yeah, I don't know, it's just really amazing too to think about like how to bring that back here. Like I don't know if I'm like, yeah, trash. The government, like even local government, like isn't really doing anything about it. Like I've complained to my councilwoman a million times, and then you look like to our comrades in like Caracas, and they're like, oh, cool, they just like made a brigade and did it. And it's not just trash. It's like part of this way of like building power, right? And this way of like that is like kind of connected to the state as well, where now that the state is getting some influx of money also because of the things have started to change a little bit with the oil crisis. Like they just at the cities, they just got a big truck donated, so they also like the Luisa Cáceres commune are processing their own recycling, and so they need to like haul around the materials. If they have certain like investments, then they can like sell the goods, like melt the plastic themselves and get more money for it and all these different things. So yeah, I don't know, it's just to me was really inspiring to kind of be around and look at, and we'll talk more about solidarity too, but I was at some point in October we didn't quite get the flyers for today either, but we'll do a report back because 3 members of our group went on a brigade to Cuba, and I was lucky enough to go on both, and so I got to Cuba right after being in Venezuela, and I was like, wait a minute, like because in Cuba they have CDRs, which are like Democratic Committees of the Revolution, and I was like, this seems really familiar. Like so you're set up on a neighborhood structure, and you have like your certain radius, and you have your own like doctors and. Oh, wait a second, but the Cuban Revolution was in like 1959, and it's not like random, right? Like because of the Cuban Revolution, like Chavez and Fidel were like great friends, and so and the two countries like continue to support each other a lot. So it's like looking in that same way where it's like, oh, well, like Comunas borrowed a lot from like CDRs in Cuba with like whatever changes like made sense in their own context, and it's not like a copy and paste thing. But yeah, like that's kind of solidarity is really exciting to think about. Yeah, and also just hearing too about one of the things we heard in the Comuna. So we were lucky enough when we visited Illiteracy, it was like part of a visit that the members of the National Assembly were at. So we were able to speak to the second vice president of the National Assembly, who's a woman, like many of Venezuela has a very high rate of women in office, Vanessa Montero, and she was talking about how like, and Jesus from the commune and also like other folks were talking about like, yeah, like, when sanctions happened and things got really hard, it's not that we just like randomly were able to survive, and many people did die and continue to die regularly, but like the communes and that organized structure like on a national level was like really important. So it was like, oh shit, there are no pads and tampons. Like, okay, well, all the women in the commune are organized, or many of the women in the commune are organized. All right, so they just like found diapers and started cutting up diapers and did that. Or like, oh, okay, well, there's no like flour, basically arepa. Well, anyway, it's not flour, but like, what would be the equivalent of flour here? Like, shit, what do we do? And it's like, oh, well, you know, like we're organized and we already have a kitchen in the commune, so we're just going to ground up yucca, which is something we do have because it grows here, or whatever. And that like because of this like really well organized and disciplined structure, like people have been able to survive in a way that like wouldn't. I don't know. I think if like we were faced with the same thing here, like we have a lot to build to get to this place where it's like, you know, like people were women, also predominantly women, but people were like sewing masks when COVID hit, when they weren't able to get vaccines because of the sanctions and all these things. So I think, I don't know, it like, I don't want to just, I think you can't talk about one without the other. You can't be like doom and gloom, like end of story. I think would be a really big disservice to like the Venezuelan people, but you also can't be like, oh my God, amazing. Like they did this really cool stuff. And you're like, yeah, but it's like 40,000 people still died in at least 1 year. And the report from the Center for Economic and Policy Research, which was the one that talked about McGovern's letter, in the same report, they said that 300,000 people were at risk of dying the same year. So like measurably, which it seems hard to even get the full number, measurably 40,000 people died. And like how many cancer patients might not like be able to get their next chemo treatment, or how many HIV patients might not be able to get their next med. So that added up to 300,000 that were at risk of dying from 2017 to 2018. So it won't go on forever because I can, but I just think it's important to lift those things up and really like all of these things can seem so far away, and it's not like an academic interest issue. It's like, I don't know, people here are getting fucked pretty, sorry, but like are whatever, getting fucked pretty badly, and like there's a huge housing crisis. It's really, really bad in Western Mass. Like rates are going up really high. Things aren't really easy here either. There's an oil crisis. And like, meanwhile, like Venezuela's like, we want to give you oil. Chavez did give oil to Massachusetts for free, but like they can't even produce oil right now because of the sanctions, and they can't get like the materials they need to like refine their own resource. So I say that to like, hopefully this makes it, I think like if we're able to walk away from the event, and it's not over, but we're able to walk away by the end of the event being like, oh, like no, this isn't just like an interesting, cool thing that like, or I'm a good person, so I care about other people's lives. Because like, I think you all seem really great, and I think you do care about other people's lives, but like, it is our struggle too. And it's like, well, hopefully one day we will have a revolution in the US, and like, who are we going to turn to when we're like, well, shit, that was really hard. And like, how are we going to deal with this? Like every time I ask people, both in Venezuela and in Cuba, like, how can we support you all, like it's like, well, first of all, please lift the sanctions, and like also like how can we support you, right? Like, you know, and so like there is a history of people going there to get political training and all of that. So I hope that I hope that people walk away with that feeling, and there's the feeling of like trying to imagine a little bit like how our reality would be different if we were able to stop the US from like suffocating Venezuela and other places like it so much, and like what that would also mean for like anybody here who's housing insecure, or like doesn't have, or like food insecure, or any of the other number of issues we face. So I will kind of end with that, but I know one person had a question. We're going to have a Q&A. We're going to have like a breakout that JR will lead us through, kind of trying to imagine those different questions a little bit, and then come back for a Q&A so that you can think together about what questions you have, and then go back to that.
Yeah, and now we're getting onto the breakout questions portion of the breakout groups portion of the event, where we were gonna do it like the first way, which was like having a bunch of people kind of like go in breakout rooms and like write on these, but we figured that since there's such a high turnout, that we go through like plan B, which is we'll just pass along like these papers on like questions that, you know, everybody kind of answers in their own capacity. Yeah, so I hope the conversations went well. Again, like Selena said, you know, these conversations can last forever. But we're wondering if, you know, we wanted to pass it around, and if anybody has any like perspectives, right? Is that what we were saying?
Yeah, just like if you have anything that you want to share from your group. I know I was listening and had some really great stuff. So we also, maybe I'll put them in the front, but we put the questions up on paper. So if you have any thoughts you want to share from the discussion with the group, and also questions, we can do like a Q&A. Like, what are the questions that came up in your group that folks are curious about?
Yeah, so like any perspectives, questions, any rants on imperialism, keep it to a minute. But nonetheless, yeah, we hope that the conversations went good. And with that being said, I'm sorry, I'm having a brain fart right now. It's Sunday. I work all week. How do we want to do this again?
Just like, I don't know.
Pass it around. First takers, going once, going twice, sold to the man in the beaches.
So, what decision makers in Massachusetts can we pressure to remove the sanctions? And who is persuadable, who is on our side, and who is against us?
That's a good question. So just to repeat that for folks, what policymakers or legislators, are potentially on our side, and who is malleable, who isn't. Kind of what's the grounding look like in not only in Western Massachusetts but in Massachusetts in general, right? Anybody?
Like, just let people ask questions and figure through.
Yeah. Do you want me to answer? Do you guys?
No, I think we
Take
can
that,
like, just
yeah.
let if people
Sure.
want to ask questions, we can just compile them or comments or whatever.
Yeah. Anybody?
You
Yeah. Well, I think it'd be too much to run the mic around. Make it a little homey, and I guess just speak up.
Just speak up. Yeah, speak up. Speak up.
Anybody have any other questions, concerns, grievances? I'm joking, obviously. Or maybe not. I don't know.
Can I respond to that particular question? I know you want to write a list, but
Sure.
forget things.
Go ahead. I'm gonna see if I can untangle this efficiently.
So that's a great question. I think we're really fortunate to live in one of the congressional districts that has somebody who cares and kind of active. That's Jim McGovern. And so there was a delegation visited him. His office is right across from Downtown Sounds on South Pleasant and in Northampton. And he, he's a longtime Central America supporter. And I had the fortune to go with these.
Do you want to use the
Had the good fortune to go with these folks to his office. And Hector just sat down with him and said, "This is what my mother's going through, and she can't get this medicine, can't get this," just what he was saying here. And, McGovern, he just tuned right in. He really listened. And he's only one person. He's in a minority, he's not a radical. He's not like AOC, but he's very progressive. And so just keep leaning on him as at least the doors open a crack. That's my view.
You can still back it too. Can I steal it?
And I guess I'll also take a stab at that. Living in Holyoke, I do have probably the worst representative in, I would say, Massachusetts, Richard Neal, right? You'd agree. I would agree, definitely. Has some very concerning ties with some very concerning amount of people, lobbyists, all the likes of the capitalists and their cronies and company. So for a guy like Richard Neal, it's I work personally for the farmers market of Holyoke. For him to come to the farmers market, yeah, good luck with that. So, but him supporting anything like that, that's also good luck with that. But essentially,
Running against them?
yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Yeah, running against him. Recently we had Alex Morse who ran against Richard Neal, and if I recall correctly, it's been a while, but he lost by a couple, maybe 1,000, maybe 2,000 votes, from my understanding. So not that bad. Unfortunately, he's in Provincetown now, but who knows? Maybe the next time come around, we could get Neal out of office. But unfortunately, he does have that. We call it the Springfield machine on lockdown, which is a bunch of super voters from Springfield coming in to completely flip I think it's R1, District 1 representative seat
Morse was
elections.
driven out with the scandal, like UMass students and stuff like that.
That was bad. But that was also a Democratic.
Yeah, well, he just got luck. I mean,
Dirty tricks.
that was a dirty trick.
Yeah.
And it cost him the election, right? I think
Dirty tricks and COVID.
it's a combination.
Well, we have the mic back, and now it's longer. So now, thanks to Liz, thank you, Liz, we can run it. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe I should have written bigger, but we put up some questions just for folks to think about, the same ones you talked about in your group, like how are our struggles connected is kind of the question about solidarity. What can we learn from the revolution in Venezuela? Do you have any questions? Basically, just whatever you talked about in your group. But I don't know. Maybe we can do like 3 comments and questions, and then like Hector and I can take a stab and 3 comments and questions if that works for folks. What do you think? Okay.
I feel like we can learn a lot from how Venezuela is trying to survive the crisis of sanctions. And because in this country we have problems with housing and healthcare and food insecurity, and I feel like ideally we can bring some of the solutions from the communes and things to our own communities.
A question, actually. I was wondering, in our country, neighborhood associations are well known for being very pro-cop and basically designed to promote property values in the neighborhood. And so I was wondering if this sort of like conservative impulse to like protect the in-group from like the outsider is something that comes up in the communes, and if they've found approaches to sort of dealing with that impulse.
Here we go.
Well, I don't have a question or answer to that, but I had my own thing that I was thinking about. Just in terms of like, how does this conversation connect to our struggles at home? I see, Venezuela as a really great, successful example of what like democratic socialism can look like in practice, like a successfully elected socialist government working in partnership with local community organizations and unions to carry out this like really great vision of a revolutionary society. And so I'm thinking now with like our work here, how can we leverage our power as workers through building like a more militant labor movement to pressure those in power and kind of drag their feet to do these things, like building affordable housing in Western Mass, like doing all these things that we need desperately as workers. And one thing that our group was talking about was how in America people are so isolated and alienated and think so individualistically. And one of the things I was thinking of was by rebuilding the labor movement, hopefully we can try to inspire this new sense of solidarity with each other that will transcend globally. So I guess, my question would be if anyone wants to pitch in, like what are ways we can connect labor with all these other struggles to make it more international instead of just focused on your one workplace.
Once, going twice. Sure. Yeah.
Those are really good questions. I think Elliot also, so I'll go maybe in order. I think Elliot already helped answer the first question, but I'll add to it. And the first question was what decision makers can we pressure? So some of the work that Anti-Imperialist Action Committee has been doing has been pressuring Congressman McGovern. And when we actually started organizing around the coup in Bolivia. We went after, we went after Warren, Markey, and McGovern, and it seems like Western Mass is this funny place where like people call themselves, a lot of people and a lot of politicians call themselves progressive, and so it's like I moved here from St. Louis and I love St. Louis, and we did not have Cori Bush when I moved from St. Louis, but it's just like there was no way in hell you were ever going to get anyone to talk about these issues. And McGovern, it took 2 years, so it wasn't just like, oh, yep, he was like, yeah, no, dictator, blah, blah. It took 2 years, but he did it. And so now, like, how do we keep the pressure up? And so I think, it's a matter of like, I'm really excited to talk to you all more and to hear what organizations people are with, but it takes a lot of work, like to plan the rallies, like, like how do we work together? So like co-sponsoring and then being better co-sponsors by shaping events together and not just putting, your name on a thing. And so how do we do all of this? So I think like in terms of that question, like I think McGovern is a really strategic person to push. And we've met with his office a few times. We talked about asking him to do specific things, and then he never gets back to us unless we show up at his door with 30 people. So if that was your question, or if you also are interested in the answer to that question, I don't know, don't just show up to his office with us and 30 other people, but help us plan it. And like, because I think that's the stalling thing. It's like a lot. And so I'm really proud of our group. We're also a small group. There are a lot of people here. This is awesome. So if you want to make that happen, then like come talk to us, you know, and like get involved in doing that. And that can be like your organization doing it too. Like, all right, you're from the DSA, like sweet, or you're from like ALF or wherever, like, let's make it happen. So that's the first one. The second one, neighborhood associations, like, is there an impulse to protect it from outsiders? I can give my perspective, you can give yours too, but do you want to do, like, you want to just like, show what's and pass it to me? Okay. I don't know, one of the things I've been, and I'm not trying to like, romanticize anything, because I don't know, one of the things we didn't talk about, and this actually came up in our group, is like the information war. So it's not that like everybody in Venezuela is like a raving socialist. Like I wanted to actually add this, because I think it touches both on that question and some of the other conversations that came up, is that like, I don't know, literally on our way to the airport, the cab driver was like, oh yeah, you see that like town over there? Is this whole town? He's like, yeah, well, Chavez was flying in a plane, and he looked down and he thought, well, that would be a great place to like build a town, because there's nothing happening with that land and a lot of people are homeless. So he like built this town, and then the whole town came out in the streets and protested against Chavez, which is like ironic in a particular way, but like that's fine, that's democracy, you know, like against Maduro, you know, against the revolutionary process that like built their houses, and that's fine, like, you know. But I think like a big part of that has to do with like information wars, and like the kind of, this isn't a direct answer to that, but it did come up in our group, and I think it's tied in that like I don't want to falsely present the idea that like everybody is like on board. Not everybody's in a commune. Not like there's plenty of opposition. There's a very strong local oligarchy. You can buy Ben and Jerry's for $11 at a very fancy supermarket. Like all of these contradictions exist at the same time. And so like then the revolution in all of its forms, and the government and the communes like has to fight against that, and has to fight against this information war, because someone in our group also brought up like that's what the sanctions are really trying to do. Like you try to make the economy scream, if any of you have heard that quote, so that people overthrow their own government, and the impacts of that are really real. So I think that, you know, it's not like everything's amazing all the time and everyone's on board, but there's this like information war. It's a war. It's like an information war going on. And that's part of it. But that's something I've been really impressed with. So I'm not saying that when I answer that question, I'm not saying like, the Venezuelan people, but like, I don't know, my personal experience like in communes is that like, I don't know, even when we had a meeting with the Luisa Cáceres commune recently, and they just like their opening to the meeting is like, you know, like you're our brothers and sisters, like how can we, I'm like, what can we do to stand in solidarity with you? And they're like, okay, well, what can we do to stand in solidarity with you? And I'm like, the government is literally killing your people. Like, I mean, like, thank you. Yeah, sure. Like, I don't know, exists so that like we have hope in our world as we try to build our own revolution. But like, yeah, I just like, that's always foregrounded, like with both of the communes we've talked to, when you're talking to people who are involved in the revolutionary process, maybe not like a random person in a park who like, I don't know, thinks that Chavez is the devil, which totally is a thing. Not that he's the devil, to be clear, but some people think that. But yeah, I don't know if you have other thoughts. Personally, I haven't really seen that at all. It's just like, I mean, you want to talk about that? Like, you always talk about how like Venezuela's always welcomed people with open arms. And so I think part of that is like a testament to like the strength of the like Venezuelan revolution, that like, you know, people are like studying together, like people are learning to read better and study together, and like have like a solid political line, and a commune that has, or whatever their organization is, or a political party that has like discipline, that is not an option. Like it's not just like they're not just random groups that are communes. They're like part of this like national kind of structure. Like they're independent, but they're also connected. And there's a part of, I think, like political education that it's like, no, like we're fighting for ourselves and my family and your family, but we're also fighting for like working people in the United States and everywhere. Do you have anything to add? There's another question, but I'm talking a lot, so.
Yeah, as far as the neighborhood associations, I think the comunas, the way they're set up, you know, the people that the leadership of the comunas are elected by the community as a whole. So is, you know, so they basically, so anybody who's like in the case of Luisa Cáceres, the neighborhood, they're surrounded by opposition, like a lot of families within the community itself are part of the opposition or don't necessarily support the government. But yeah, I think having the election process within the comuna allows them to have a lot more autonomy and really dictate their future and what they want to focus on. There's definitely a big push from the right to label the comuna as another government program that's just not doing anything. But it's hard to deny that they're actually building stuff and stuff is really happening. But in particular with the neighborhood associations compared to here in the U.S., I don't know enough like if that's really happening on the ground. But if I come across it, definitely share it with you. But.
And then the third question was, embarrassingly, I can't read my own handwriting. So could you, what was the third question or your question?
Like, how do you connect like the labor movement in the U.S. to like fighting for these issues, and also connect the labor movement to be more international in its focus rather than just focusing on their one workplace or domestic?
One very pragmatic or like tangible, I don't think it's like a catch-all solution, but one thing that our group would really like to do is to have a couple years ago we did this with another commune, but to have a direct conversation with the comuna Luisa Cáceres. And so Hector had talked to them when he met with them in person, had talked to them about that. And I think that like we were talking about it and I actually said like, actually, you know what, like hold on, because I think this conversation is really important. And when this conversation happens, like I want it to happen with like, I want to make sure people are in the room. And I think it's really important to like build deeper relationships. IAC is small and it's young. And so like, I guess one thing is to like, who are all of you? Who are your bases? Who are you connected to? And like, do you want to see that happen? Because like, I don't know, I think it's kind of special that we have this relationship with them, and I'm also not interested in being a gatekeeper. I want to like organize a thing. Also, it's kind of hard. We need interpreters. We need someone to run tech. Like we need to make sure that like, like maybe we can project it to make it a hybrid event. Like who can do that? Like who can we get there? Like all those questions. So, I mean, I don't think that's going to like internationalize and like build working class power across the entire country immediately, which would be awesome. But it is one thing that we want to do, and that's just like what I think maybe can happen to do that. So I think like if you're interested in doing that, again, like come talk to us. I think it's just a matter of like who can put in the work to make it happen, and then let's make it happen. And yeah, I think like, I don't know, I'm always really impressed by like the level of discipline. I think with our comrades, just like study is really important. I know like a couple of folks, JR and Corey, who's amazingly making the food, so thank you, Corey, have been talking about like, Corey just organized a film screening with a film that Kevin made, who's sitting over there. And, like I was just brushing up on this book, like about how communes are structured for this event. So like maybe we can study together. And I used to actually be a union organizer for quite a while. Now I work for Tricontinental, which writes a lot about this kind of stuff. But I think that's really, really important work, and it just part of that is discipline and study. And I don't have a perfect answer, but I would like to like answer it together because I think it's a really good question.
Yeah, I mean, as far as like, if you know anybody in the labor movement, get them in touch with us. I think it's yeah. Lydia's here. So thank you, Lydia, for being here. And yeah, so yeah, just sharing the information that you know, and yeah, just keep leaning on a local congressman. I think out of all of them, McGovern's the one that's most movable. We haven't gotten anywhere with Warren or Markey. I think one of them wrote a statement about Bolivia. They knows about it. The Bolivia coup that happened a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I know. Corey's cooking up a storm, so maybe we can do like 2. What does that mean? Okay, sorry. Michael's our lovely timekeeper, stopping me from talking for forever. Maybe we can do 2 more questions. 2 more questions and comments, and then is that? I don't know. I'm hand reading. Okay, 2 more questions and or comments, and then there are a couple of like asks we wanted to relay, and then we have like a giant 2 coolers of beer and soda and food and stuff. So also maybe we can just like applaud the grillers for making us food. So thank you, Corey, and for doing that. So maybe we'll take 2 last ones and then we can keep talking over food.
Hi everyone. I think this is a very nice event. The solidarity with the people of Venezuela is very, very important. I'm from Costa Rica, and I've noticed since I got here, there's a tendency in the US to I mean, you guys were in Venezuela, so it was different, but a tendency to view processes in other countries kind of unilaterally, no? When we're studying a revolution, which is a very massive historical event, like Venezuela's 30 million people, as you said, there are many organizations. There's the PSUV, which is in power, the Chavistas and the Maduristas. Then there's the communists, there's social democrats, fascists, right-wingers, etc. And like, I think it's very important to not only think it's an information war or there's only opposition from the right, when if you just open up the Communist Party's newspaper, the first thing it says is unity of the working class against the government, because they have their own criticisms, and they're not criticisms that they weren't planted in their minds from the US. They're independent actors in Venezuela. They're communists, they're workers, they're union organizers, they're revolutionaries, right? And they'll have their own very fair criticisms, like, why are US oil companies allowed to operate in Venezuela? Why do we still have a liberal constitution? Why is the private property of the big bourgeoisie still in some regard protected? Like, why haven't we deepened? And these are all polemics that have arisen from within Venezuela, and because they're to further the revolutionary process, it's not to hold it back. So I think this is a conversation between revolutionaries. We can all agree with the destruction of the US state, with the end of sanctions, with that the US should not intervene in any other country, but we also must recognize that in other countries there's also different groupings on the left, right? Even if we want to go back to the time of Allende, there were other revolutionary groups that were criticizing Allende for not getting weapons to the people, and that's what got Allende overthrown, for example, adhering to a bourgeois constitution. So that's just something I wanted to mention. But anyway, thank you for the space to speak.
Anybody else? Going once, going twice. Oop. Got tangled. Yeah, those were all like really great. And if anybody has, please raise. I'd love to like go back to kind of like the neighborhood association point on like communes. That it's really fascinating as like how that's springing about in the belly of the beast, and in both Europe and America itself, and even Canada as well, is tenants unions and tenants associations, right? A mini kind of like commune, I would argue, in essential. I have my own like kind of perspectives as like a tenants union leader for neighbor to neighbor, and just like seeing the fact that people, a couple blocks that way, Lyman Terrace, who folks, maybe the OGs here know exactly well, are the roots of Lyman Terrace, one of the very first tenants associations and tenants unions in Holyoke and even in Western Mass in general that really were militant on. The whole history in a nutshell is like the place was gonna get torn down, and the residents came together in the 70s and the 80s under Carlos Vega and a couple other OGs in the movement, and decided to stop that. And we talk about like that militant from that the neighborhood associations, and that's really correlating there, because when you start at kind of like tenants unions, you start to see people wonder, how do I tie this back to my workplace? Gee, a union? What does that mean? It's fascinating. We have these meetings in Spanish because Holyoke is full of Spanish speakers, and you see these people like, oh, ¿qué es un sindicato? What are these things truly? Why don't I have these in my workplaces? Why are we stopping just here at this apartment complex? And you're really battling against like the gentrifiers. You're battling against the statesmen, right? The representatives, the mayors, the city councilors who all just want to gentrify Holyoke. And while meeting, they want a spurt of economy back into Holyoke. We're a poor city, but you have a lot of residents battling against that, right? That we want to make housing affordable. How do we tie this into our workplace? How do we tie this within the unions? So I figured that's like the best comparison that I'd like to make there. It's just fascinating seeing like that organically sprout up. So get in touch with the Tenants Association.
Yeah, thanks, Jared. I think thanks, Nico, for raising that. I think it's really important to acknowledge that there are and I think maybe we didn't quite do that there are like lots of very valid debates happening within revolutionary processes. And I think when I talked about criticism in the beginning, I'm in the U.S. and we're in the U.S. and most people here I think are from the U.S. and so I think, and I'm actually going to steal what Kevin said at the film screening, but I think like even if we all don't agree on anything, or not anything, even if we don't agree on even if we don't agree on everything, like agreeing that like what you said, that like the U.S. shouldn't be interfering in Venezuela or anywhere else, and it's up to the Venezuelan people to figure out their own debates. And like communes, even within the commune structure or within a single commune, they're having these debates all the time. So it's not to say that Melody is beyond criticism. He's not. And like, yeah, I think, you know, it might be interesting for folks to read one of Travis's last speeches, Strike at the Helm, where he talked about like we have to be able to criticize ourselves. I think what I maybe just to clarify a little bit, like the point I kind of wanted to get across was that like, as generally for the most part, I think with this crowd, like, or at least as people being in the U.S., since we're physically in the U.S., like it's not our place to say that we know better than the Venezuelan people on these events, on like any of these debates. And I don't think you're doing that at all, but I think that's something that like can happen. So when our group started, we were like, okay, well, this coup happened in Bolivia, a fascist, racist coup happened, and there's like massacres going on throughout the country. Some of the responses we got immediately were like, well, I'm not condemning the coup because Evo Morales like built a road in the rainforest. And I was like, okay, right there, that's a real debate that like indigenous groups are having with the government in Bolivia, and these things are happening. But to be in the U.S. and be like, well, I won't condemn the coup because like I don't agree with something Evo did. It's like, well, indigenous people are being massacred. And I think like that's kind of like for this crowd maybe, or like for our work here, like what does it mean to organize in the belly of the beast? It's like to recognize, which thank you for raising that again, like to recognize that like, yeah, like there's going to be lots of contradictions and debates and disagreements within the Venezuelan left. And it's not that you can't like, you know, just have criticisms. And I think, I would imagine Melo's government has its own self-criticisms. There are people who aren't happy with him, and that's fine. And I think things should be Venezuelans who think things should be going the other way, not from a bourgeois perspective, but, you know, like debates within the left. But I think just recognizing that, like, no matter what conversations are happening and debates are happening, like, it's the right of the Venezuelan people to have those debates. And as people in the belly of the beast, I think it's our responsibility to let them have those conversations, like, democratically and without like the weight of these really horrible sanctions. I think like they can work it out and like figure out I think that's ultimately what's at stake. Like they can figure out the direction of their country and their revolution, and they will, and they'll have those debates. And I hope I didn't minimize that, but I just wanted to kind of thank you for raising that, and thank people for being here. And I think there's food, so I don't want to keep people from it, but I'm just going to close with a couple of maybe like asks to bring forward. So I hope our goal, I think like Hector and I were talking this morning, like a goal for this event was to have people walk away thinking like that this is your struggle too, and to kind of understand some of like what the U.S. is doing to Venezuela, and like why, like what's at stake in the revolution that like that our government wants to keep us from, and apply that here. So I hope people are walking away with some of that. And I think there are three kind of specific things we thought of is like no matter, and you raised this in some of the group discussions and the comments too, like no matter what work you're doing, whether it's like joining IAC or being part of your own organization, like incorporate anti-imperialist solidarity and education and organizing into your work. So if you're with a labor union, I know like I've had conversations with some of you who are already doing that. That's awesome. Like people doing that, and people like building their own, you know, like building cadre within your organizations, and always looking at everything through an anti-imperialist lens and through a lens of solidarity. Like it could be the tenants union, it could be, you know, like organizing a Trader Joe's, it could be the DSA, it could be, you know, there are a variety of political parties who are here at PSL and FRSO and others. So, you know, tying that into your work. If there are specific things that we're working on, whether it's organizing the event with the Comuna, you know, like get involved. Like if you want to join IAC, like, I don't know, maybe if folks who are involved in IAC can raise your hands again, come talk to one of us. Even if you don't think you have the capacity to join another organization, but you like want to make the event happen, come talk to us. If you want to get involved in the anti-sanctions campaign with McGovern, come talk to us. And kind of last pitch is one of the things they didn't ask, but we offered to the commune because Hector went, and there are a number of like things that they are trying to work on that are resource specific. We, you know, like we have a little bucket, and the food was all donated, but like whatever you might, you know, whatever you feel like donating, or you might, you know, whatever you have will go directly to them. And we ask them both that they communicate like what they think they might use it for. If they use it for something else, that's fine, but that they let us know, and we'll report back to folks like, hey, like however many months down the road, like this is what they were able to do. So this will go to I'm just going to read the automatic translation of what the message they sent, which is that it'll be directed to the construction of a recycling school they're building in the commune, which is located in the space that Hector visited. That financial support will go to the construction of a roof, constructing a slab or floor, electrical system, bathrooms, dining rooms, tools for the school, contributing to the workforce that's making this beautiful dream possible. So like some of the people are paid, like who are doing the like cleaning brigade, for example, every day. So there's that. And they said this gesture of solidarity will help to complete the first recycling school in Swatigi, which is the state, which will be built and run by community members who in turn will share their experience and knowledge with other communities who don't know about recycling yet. So it's a way of kind of like self-funding. So yeah, got it. So there's that. We also have a Venmo. And then do you want to do that, Hector? Because I think that's great. Just want to announce, actually one of the people who helped start, I want to name this too. So one of the people who helped start the Anti-Imperialist Action Committee was Marty Nathan. I don't know if any of you know her. She was an amazing woman and she passed away in November. It's Elliot's wife who's sitting here, so thank you for joining us. And IAC formed because there was like, I don't know, the coup in Bolivia happened and emails started and like Marty was on that email. It's just like, well, I don't know, does anyone want to do something? This is ridiculous. And Marty was the one who's like, yeah, like, you know, I'm gonna call these people. And Marty was just like such a leader and a champion in so many ways. And it's because of Marty and the confidence that Marty gave everybody around her. And just like leadership that she constantly was passing down that IAC exists in the first place. And the reason we're saying that in particular is
Yeah, so next Sunday, this next Sunday, November 18th, September 18th. So there will be a commemoration of Marty's life, and so we'll send it out as well. So we'll through our network. Date and time, Elliot.
This will be 3 to 5 p.m. or maybe 3 to 7 at the Bombay X in Florence. And you can find more information about it if you go to the Markham Nathan Fund for Social Justice. It's on Facebook. There's announcements in many places. Some of you may have received one already. But it's to honor the life of a great activist. Thank you.